Before we get into today's interview, I want to say thank you to everyone on Patreon who supports this show. You're the reason I can keep creating this content after more than 10 years of doing it on my own. Your support helps cover hosting costs and keeps these conversations alive for the survivors out there who desperately need hope, clarity, and community. I also want to take a moment to give a shout out to everyone who comments on YouTube, leaves reviews on Spotify or Apple, has bought the book, or simply tunes in without skipping the ads. You are helping stroke survivors feel less alone, and that matters. Now, today's episode is a powerful one. I'm speaking with David Willick, who experienced an ischemic stroke caused by a PFO, a hidden heart condition he never knew he had. What makes David's story so important is that you can't see the sensory overload, the extreme fatigue, and the invisible deficits that shape his recovery. If you've ever felt misunderstood because you look fine on the outside, but your brain tells a different story, this episode will resonate deeply. Let's get into it. David Willick, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Bill.
David, what did a normal day look like for you before stroke?
Well, I had a global role and in an internationally recognized company, and I actually reported into Australia from Canada. So I used to call some of my days bookend days because they would begin at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a few hours and then calm down a little bit. And I would do my day job with my local people in my own time zone. And then right about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, Australia would wake up and it would get super busy again well into the evening. And that was my day.
Wow.
Managing a large department and with lots of direct reports. So it was good. It was fun, but I thought I was Superman. I could do it all
And you probably did do it all for a little while.
for a little while.
What industry was it in?
It was in the electronics industry.
Okay. So then the 4:30 start, was that just to get you going for the day? What was the 4:30 in the morning start all
Well,
about?
sometimes, yeah. So what that was is working within the convenient time zones of the people that were in Australia, and so it wasn't every day. Uh, it was maybe once a week or twice a week but nevertheless, and it was just over the years, it just became normal, and that's just what you had to do, and you just rolled with it. So that was pre-stroke.
What does the family life look like at that time?
We're empty nesters, my wife and I, so and very open, and we did what we had to do. So when the kids were younger, the role wasn't as demanding, and so I was able to have a fairly decent work-life balance before that. But it was only really intense for a couple of years before the stroke. Prior to that, it was less intense, and therefore there was a fairly decent work-life balance, raising the kids to the point where they eventually left the nest.
Hmm. What were your goals, responsibilities, or passions back then?
Um, Goals were, family oriented, success oriented, both success, with home, but success with work as well, and building a career and moving up the corporate ladder. Um, and my hobbies, included doing stuff, sports, woodworking, that type of thing.
At the end of the interview, hopefully remind me if I've forgotten to ask you what success looks like now. I don't want an answer now. I want it at the end because I imagine it
Okay.
will have changed just a little bit, but it'd be interesting to hear what that is. So, did you have a sense of your health back then? Did you have an idea of whether you consider yourself healthy? Was there any signs of any ill health or potential challenges coming up?
No, there wasn't. As a matter of fact, I would have annual executive physicals, ate a great diet. I thought, fantastic. Avoided, all of the taboo foods. I had stopped drinking alcohol a few months before the stroke, just because I just felt that it was the right thing to do. There was new food guides introduced, and not that I had a problem before, but it was just the new daily recommendations essentially were avoided if you can. And then as far as I had low blood pressure and borderline low. I had essentially low to normal cholesterol. Um, Never smoked a day in my life, anything. And so, you know what? After the stroke, when I was in the hospital, they said, you won the negative lottery. There was like a 1 in a million chance you would have this. And because you had no risk factors for that, and I'm not overweight. I'm in the same size pant that I was, finishing secondary school way back when. And so, it was just one of those things. And in
Hmm.
my case, it ended up to be a PFO or a significant hole in my heart.
Well, that will do it. Yeah. And one of those things can be there forever for some people and cause no challenges. And then for some people, it then at some point does cause a problem. Did you have the PFO closed up?
I did. Unfortunately, it was after the stroke. And so I had a catheter surgery, which is pretty amazing. It was day surgery, right? And yeah, I checked into the hospital at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, did pre-op at 2:30. Um, and essentially they put a camera up your vein in your arm, and then the catheter with the device goes through the artery in your leg, in your groin area, and you're completely awake during the whole thing. They're asking you questions. And in my case, it was a pretty significant hole. So they said that the device that they used to cover the hole was 25 millimeters. So pretty significant. And they closed it. And so it was interesting. And I described it to my friends that it was essentially like, those fruity drink umbrellas that you get when you're on vacation. It was essentially two of those going up through your groin. And the first one gets pushed through the hole, then gets inflated. And then the second one gets up to the other side of the hole and gets inflated. And then they torque them down together, and that plugs the hole.
Wow. That is stunning.
And you know what? And then it is stunning. And so 2 o'clock check-in, pre-op 2:30, procedure at about 4 or 5 o'clock, post-op at about 6 p.m. They get you up walking around the ward of the hospital. If you can do one lap without bleeding, you're good to go. And I was resting comfortably in my own bed by 9 p.m. the same day it was done.
That's sensational. So, years ago, maybe not that many years ago, that would have been an open chest procedure.
Exactly. It really was.
Mm, that's phenomenal. I love how far technology, science has come. It's just brilliant that it can be like that. And to hear that, hopefully now the potential for another stroke has decreased even further. And then
Exactly. And
that
so,
means that
yeah,
just
now that
from
the
now on.
PFO has been closed,
Mm,
yeah. So now that it's been closed, they said my risk is decreased significantly.
mm. So on the day, what was the first sign that something wasn't right?
It happened in the evening and as I was sleeping. And so first thing in the morning, We had a small dog at the time that required medication that didn't like the pill. And so I would open the capsule of his pill and put it in his food. And so normal day, I pick up the capsule because I'm right-handed with my right hand. I went to take off the other side of the capsule with my left hand, and I made three or four attempts at it. I couldn't line up my left hand to grab the other side of the capsule. So then I thought, well, that's really, really odd. Eventually, I got it, but it was multiple attempts. And then I decided, let's make a pot of coffee. And so I reached over for a plastic pitcher that we fill up with water to fill the coffee pot, and I dropped it. And I had no sensation. I couldn't detect how hard or how lightly I was squeezing the handle of the pitcher, so I dropped it. And after these two things happened, my wife was still sleeping at the time. I woke her up and I said, something is not right. Get me to the hospital.
We'll be back with more of David's story in just a moment, but first I want to take a moment to acknowledge something important. If what you've heard so far resonates, the fatigue, the sensory overload, the frustration of looking normal when you're anything but, I want you to know that you're not alone. David's experience mirrors what so many stroke survivors go through every day. And the second half of this episode gets into how he rebuilds his energy, reshaped his mindset, and found stability again. But before we continue, I also want to take a moment to thank Banksia Tech for supporting this episode. They're proud distributors of the Hansen Rehab Glove by Sorebo, a soft robotic glove designed to help stroke survivors improve hand function at home, whether you're early in recovery or years into it. You'll hear more about the glove later on. Also, go to banksiatech.com.au to find out more. So what went through your mind as it began to escalate? Can you get me to the doctor? A few minutes ago, I could do these things with my hands. Now I can't. Was there anything going through your mind?
Yeah, at first, what went through my mind was, did I pinch my neck as I was sleeping? Like, was it because I felt fine. I was able to walk, I was able to move around. I had no paralysis at that time in my face. I had no issues. And, you know, looking at it, in 2020 hindsight, it was the beginning of the stroke. It wasn't an actual stroke yet. So it was a blood flow restriction. And so I was able to still move, um, but it was some blood was still getting through. It hadn't fully blocked yet.
Ah, okay. Ambulance turns up.
So, but no, we were living in a very remote area, and so we didn't call the ambulance. And this is where the story takes another turn for the worst. Um, and so we didn't call the ambulance because I still at this point thought it was just a pinched nerve or something like that. And so anyway, my wife drove me to the nearby hospital, which was about maybe a 35-minute drive. But keep in mind, this is very remote, very almost primitive type of hospital. They were understaffed at this particular hospital, and they had substituted the triage nurse with a PSW, so just a personal support worker not trained in nursing or whatever. And after this all happened, I had filed a formal complaint and with the hospital, and then I was able to get the report. And what I learned from the report, didn't know at the time, but the triage nurse, clicked the wrong button on her mouse. Instead of highest priority, she clicked lowest priority. And so I sat there for 2.5, 3 hours waiting to be treated in the emergency room. And we kept going up to the nurse every 15, 20 minutes to the PSW. This isn't right. Something's not right. Other people are coming in and out, other people. Anyway, So when I finally got to see the doctor recognized the signs right away, and he ordered what they call a hot ambulance, so lights and sirens all the way to a larger center where they could confirm what type of stroke it was, what was happening. So they didn't have a CT scanner at the small remote hospital that we went to, but he needed the CT scan. I said, just give me the clot buster drug, TPA. And he says, listen, if you're having a hemorrhagic stroke, this is going to kill you. So I can't just give it to you. And but we'll try to get you there as fast as possible. So guess what happened? I actually through the rural roads and bumping and grinding through in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, I had the stroke in the ambulance. So this is when the blood flow was completely stopped to that portion of my brain. So it was the frontal lobe right side. And so by the time when my wife dropped me off at the small hospital, and they told her don't even try to follow the ambulance because we're going to be going full speed. So when she got and saw me at the larger center, she said it was unbelievable. It was night and day. My face on the left side was completely drooped. I had mobility issues on my left side. You know, it was significantly worse because the stroke had occurred in the ambulance on the way. I had no sensation whatsoever on my left side. The ambulance attendant that was with me, had this device. It looked like a sharpened pencil, and he was sticking it at various different parts of my left side, and I had no feeling whatsoever.
Yeah. Wow, man. I've been through all of those
Yeah.
tests and all of those uh, scary moments waiting for somebody to take action to do something. Both from my perspective, I've done that to myself by delaying going to the hospital, and also then after having an incident while at a hospital, sitting on the chair in emergency and waiting for somebody to see you is a really difficult time. It is such a difficult time. Did you have any thoughts, any kind of like, this can't be happening moment? Did you, were you cognitively there enough to be able to do that?
Sorry, you froze there for a minute, Bill.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Did you have any, this can't be happening thoughts in your head?
Yeah, I was floored. This can't be happening. What the heck is going on?
Mm.
And then I'm negotiating at the larger center of, give me TPA, give me the clot buster. And they said no, because and of course it's a completely different set of doctors. They said no, because you had this in the night and it was more than 4 hour window. And I said, no, no, I didn't. I said there was a restriction. I wasn't like this. This only happened a half an hour ago. And but they wouldn't give it to me. And so there was a little bit of miscommunication between the smaller center and the bigger center. But yeah, so it was disbelief. It was, how could this be happening? I have a healthy lifestyle. The only risk factor I had for a stroke was stress, and everything else was I didn't have.
Yeah. What were you afraid of most at the beginning?
Deficits, right? My ability to losing the ability to walk or to use my hands, physical impairments, cognitive impairments. I didn't think of cognitive impairments back then, and when it first happened, I was just more focused on I don't want to be left with any physical deficits.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's probably how you recognize somebody that's had a stroke. If you see physical deficits, it makes it quite obvious that a person like that has had some kind of a neurological situation. But then there's the invisible deficits as well, which plague people after a stroke. Who was it that first helped you make sense of what had happened? Did that take a little bit of time, or how did you wrap your head around the situation that you found yourself in now?
Yeah, so I was in the hospital for 6 days, um, and getting CT scans and MRIs and meeting with the neurologists and the doctors there. And I was in the stroke ward, so there was other peers, um, and then there was the physical therapy and occupational therapy sessions that I would have. And so I guess everybody was pleasant and nice, but then, working with the neurologist at the hospital, I guess he was more the realist. And they said, listen, sir, like, I was a little bit making light of this. It was, I'm just going to bounce back and I'm going to be fine because the 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 loss of feeling and the complete loss of feeling on my left side only lasted, I would say, for about 36 hours. And then the feeling came back. And but my deficit was fine motor skills with my left hand. And so, I thought, just another day or so, and I'm going to get all those back, right? And so that's my philosophy at the time. And then it wasn't until meeting with the neurologist at the hospital that put it in perspective. And he said, listen, this was not a small stroke. You are going to have deficits. And he said that on a scale of 1 to 10, this was about a 5.5.
Mm,
So he said, you're awfully lucky that, this fine motor skill is your only physical deficit, but I guarantee you there's going to be deficits from this. And he was right. He was
mm,
right. But I was incredibly determined to, uh, had almost like a perfect life beforehand, right? Everything was going well, and it's going, perfectly and all this. And I was determined to get back to my near perfect life as fast as I possibly could. So the occupational therapist, they showed me where the self-help table was. And when I wasn't in my room, I was at this self-help table going through all these things. So I would have the formal occupational therapy for with a therapist for an hour a day, but I would work at the self-help table for 2 to 3 hours before my session and 2 to 3 hours after the session. Like, what else do you do? You're in the hospital, you're locked down, right? So I was always at that table and working through that, and
that
which really helped.
that's exactly my point, the theory as well. I was in rehab. My left side was numb. I had to learn how to walk again, use my left side. Motor skills were off. Um, the muscles in my leg were weaker or didn't weren't activating, so my knee kept dropping. I couldn't stand up, and but I was experiencing fatigue, a lot of fatigue, and I'd go to rehab. We'd do the hour, in the rehab hospital for whatever day that was. Sometimes it was in the pool, sometimes it was in the gym, sometimes it was playing video games, and then I would come back and have a bit of a nap or a rest and kind of recuperate. But then there might be some time, quite a lot of time between the next session. So I would meditate and imagine myself walking again. I would imagine my hand working again. And I imagined that doing those tasks perfectly as if it was doing them before the deficit. But it wasn't in reality, it wasn't doing it perfectly, but in my mind, I was running the program for perfection of the walk and using the arm so that the neurons that are firing off in my head then hopefully have something to remember and recognize when I'm going through the physical part of the recovery. And then I was watching YouTube videos of people and neuroplasticity and about stroke recovery and about all this kind of stuff. And I was just trying to find as many different resources to just complete the recovery picture, even though it was only an hour or two a day. Physically, it was maybe 6 or 7 hours in total because the rest of it included all these other little bits and pieces. And I think it helped tremendously because instead of just sitting there being bored, it made me feel like I was contributing to the recovery more and more. And that was what I think got me through the one, probably the 5 weeks that I spent in rehab.
That's awesome. And that's along the lines of what I was doing as well. Just really pushing the envelope to visualize yourself, back. Um, I'm an engineer, and so there was this uh rector set toy type of thing at the occupational therapy, and I was just so focused on, these small nuts and bolts and being able to do this again because I like tinkering with machines and, on the side, and it was so important to me to have that back, to not lose that and what I used to do. And my manager sent me this book, and it was called My Stroke of Insight, and it's a
Joe
very
Bolte Taylor.
popular yeah, exactly. And I found that fascinating, and it was very helpful for me to read through that, and it taught me a lot, and it also taught me just, when your body says rest, rest. And I had tremendous amount of fatigue, and so when people would look at me, they would say, well, you look normal, you don't have that deficit, but they didn't realize how hard it was and how much I was struggling. And during the first, I would say, 2 months uh, after getting out of the hospital, I had two periods of 48 hours where I slept for about 44 of the 48 hours.
Wow.
And I would wake up and maybe have, a little bit of food. And then I would look at my wife and I'd say, you know what? I feel really tired again. And then I would sleep for like another 10 hours and get up for 10 minutes. And then, my wife phoned the hospital and she said, "Is this normal?" And he said, "Just let him get as much rest as he needs." And it was almost like my brain became like an infant again. And when you're learning so much and you're trying to rebuild so much, you require a lot more sleep.
It is,
And so the fatigue, yeah.
I was going to say, it's a great analogy. Your brain is becoming an infant again and it needs to heal and recover. And sleep is one of the most critical things that you need for recovery. Without sleep, then those neuronal structures they can't become stable and they can't stay attached uh, and they just disappear. So you need, as one of the key ingredients to the physical recovery, you need the sleep. That's the next stage of the physical recovery, so that those neuronal patterns can stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I respected that, and I never I never tried to force myself to stay awake when my body was telling me I needed to sleep.
Mm,
And another thing that was really, weird or interesting in my case, every stroke is different, but when my sensation came back on my left side, it came back in a hyper way. And so if I say before the stroke, it was 100%, and then, at the first 36 hours or so, it was zero. when it did come back, it came back like 125%. And so it took me 6 months to have a warm shower again because even warm water felt scalding to my skin, absolutely scalding. And so it was almost like a heightened sensitivity on the surface of my skin.
What about
So that
cold?
was
Because
really,
I have the same issue on my left side, oversensitive. Um, the wind on catching the hair on my arm hurts. The hot
yeah.
water, I don't know whether it's warm enough or cold enough. I can never tell because half of my body's feeling good, the other half's not feeling the best. Sometimes I perspire on just half of my face or body. So,
All right.
do you have similar kinds of things as well?
No, for some reason it wasn't the cold so much, and it was the heat. And so I would take ice showers only because anything warm was scalding on my left side. And so I got used to just taking cold showers, but I never had that um, the extreme, like my right side just seemed to adapt and be okay with the cold. It wasn't like I was shivering. It was more sensation. The heat was a big deal.
Hmm. What was the hardest challenge to overcome physically or emotionally?
It was the exhaustion associated with complicated tasks. It took me a year to learn how to drive an automobile again, and and not to say that I couldn't do it. I could do it, but driving for 5 minutes or 10 minutes would cause me to need to sleep for hours. All right. And so, and so, and the best way to describe it is when I was learning how to drive again, and I'd been driving for decades, and all the normal, driving that had become automatic to me. It's almost like my automatic part of my brain was no longer there. That's where the stroke was. And so everything became very manual. And let me describe it with a bit of an analogy. So when I first started driving again, I lived in a small remote area with only one stoplight in the whole town. And so as I'm approaching the stoplight and the light is red, there's a truck in front of me, and then say, okay, my brain's telling me, okay, I must apply the brakes, but there's a car behind me, but I can't apply the brakes too quickly. Otherwise, I'm going to get rear-ended. If I apply the brakes not hard enough, then I'm going to hit the end of that truck. So at what point in time, and that mechanical thought process was there on every observation. And so to this day, 3 and a bit years later, driving in acclimate weather conditions still makes me more exhausted than anything else,
Mm,
right? So if it's raining, if it's dark, if it's snowing, and I'm driving, and the noise associated with the car. I had a real issue with noise, and I for the first 6 months I had to wear noise canceling headphones and sunglasses even inside the house
mhm.
because any noise was just it was just mind-boggling. And I remember going to a restaurant the first time after a stroke, and I was starving. I was really hungry, and I went out with my wife and our two closest friends, and and it was like my brain was trying to understand everything that was happening in the room, every single conversation at every single table. I was trying to understand, and I was trying to just, and I couldn't shut out background noise, and I was just trying to understand it. And so after about 35, 40 minutes, I didn't even touch my meal. I said I can't do it. I'm too tired. I need to leave. And so I
Sensory
had to leave.
overload.
And that's what it was. Exactly.
Hmm. It's very common, and I still get sensory overload. Right now, in front of me, there's a bright light. You can see it reflecting on my hand,
Yes.
and it's necessary because of what you hear about recording videos and all that. Yeah, there's certain things you have to do to make sure that the lighting is amazing and you look fantastic. And on this side, there's another bright light. Exactly. There you go. There's that bright light there. And the challenge with these lights is that they are the widest of the white lights. And in that spectrum, even on a cloudy day where the sun is not appearing, but it kind of is causing that real bright sort of experience, I get headaches. So I have to record a podcast interview every time with two lights that are going to cause me mild discomfort while I'm discussing it, and then a little bit of time to recover afterwards. I've got some noise cancelling headphones. I take them on the airplane. I take them if I go to a concert or somewhere loud, and I just put them in just so that I can just get a little bit of chill time and I can enjoy the space, because I used to avoid going to those events because it was too hard. So that helps. And it it's one of the things that has sort of lasted the longest for me is that light, sound, sensitivity, but it is lesser than before. So it doesn't happen as often, except if it's a cloudy day. If it's a cloudy day, it's happening all day. And there have been moments where in the house as well, I'll have my sunglasses on during the day. And at night, there's no lights above my head. It's all dark above my head, and we just have night lights in the corner. So, very common experience, and one of the ones that is the most manageable for me. It's one of the ones that I can manage quite as better. Pair of sunglasses, thankfully for the noise cancelling earphones, and then changing the lighting.
Right. Yeah. No, it's hard to describe to anybody that hasn't been through the experience.
Mm.
To this day, I still have difficulty listening to some music, especially if it's like music in the car. I can't do it yet, and it's
Yeah,
just because there's too much going on. I
I
remember my first Christmas, post-stroke, my first Christmas, and my daughter was had background music, Christmas music on in the background, and the chatter in the foreground and the music in the background was too much. So I had to ask her to shut that off. But I'm better now. I'm better, but it still adds an element of exhaustion.
if I'm in the car early in the morning and the music is off, it's a way better, and there's no radio. It's way better than if it was on. And I've just become more recently aware that the radio's not on and there's no additional noise, and that's a better experience while I'm driving and focusing on the road. So that happens quite often now. As the day progresses, and I think, my brain comes online, or I wake up more, or I'm not sure what the word is, it gets a little better. But then if I've had a big day and then I'm tired at the end of the day, then it's better to
Yeah,
have it off. So that's fascinating.
right.
Did you have a moment when things clicked for you and you kind of felt, oh my gosh, I've improved here, or I've got better here? I found myself in a situation where I wasn't the most aware of my improvements. Somebody else had to tell me. And at one point in the communication recovery, speaking, and that my psychologist was the one who brought it to my attention. Did you have a aha moment like that?
I did actually, and what I did again, being a scientific person, I kept a journal, and I kept a journal of what I was doing today, and what worked, what didn't work, um, and then because I was dealing with a little bit of depression at the time as well. Um, and I found what was helpful for me was just to record and keep a daily journal on what I actually did do. And so then I would look over the list at the end of the week and I think, you know what? This stuff is I've definitely improved. And at the very beginning, just little things like if something went wrong, it would send me down a downward spiral, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2 days. And and it was hard to get out of that. Say, for example, I lost a key and I know I'm going to find this key and I know it's somewhere in the house, but I lost it. And so a downward spiral and that I guess the aha moment was when I started reviewing things and realized like, these little things that used to trip me up all the time, they're not tripping me up anymore and I'm able to do it. And I was able to be less bothered by this, um, which which was helpful.
Yeah, I had moments where I went to when I first started driving again, I went to the local shopping mall, what we call a shopping center. And I parked the car and then went and picked up the things I needed to pick up the dinner, for dinner that night. And then I went to find the car and I couldn't find the car. I had no idea where the car was. And I was walking around the car park for ages and ages. And I just rang my brother at one point and I said, I think he rang me, what are you doing? What are you up to? I said, I've just gone to the shops and I went and bought some things and I'm looking for my car. I have no idea where the car is. Just cannot find it. And uh, it was more a what the heck is going on moment. Like it was more me going, this is so strange. This is so bizarre. I have no recollection of where I parked the car, which level it might be on, which wing of the shopping center it might be on. I had no idea and just kept walking around. And then eventually, I don't know whether I fluked it or I just stumbled on or what happened, but I had oh, okay, there it is. And I got in the car and it wasn't an hour. I don't think I was looking for an hour, but it was way longer than, say, 30 minutes. And it was just so interesting for it to be gone. And when my memory came back, I, I couldn't remember, for example, who came to visit me at some point. And even about a year ago, I bumped into a friend of mine who said, I came to visit you and we had lunch, etc.
Really?
And I said, that is not in my memory at all. Like, I believe you, but I just cannot recall it. And then that started to get better, and I started to remember uh, things, and I kind of felt much better about it. And also speaking. So I would start a sentence and then forget in the middle of the sentence what I was talking about, and my wife would go, "Where's the rest of the sentence?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's gone. I've got nothing to say."
Interesting. You know, I didn't have those exact issues, but I had an issue with repeating myself.
Mm.
And I would completely forget that I had just explained something to somebody. And then, 30 minutes would go by and then I would explain it all over again, or I would ask a question all over again and say, well, we just covered this, you know, 30 minutes ago. Has it changed? And I said, we did. I I, I didn't have any recollection of the prior
Mm.
conversation. So, the repeating myself got better, over time, but I didn't recognize it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the part of it. You don't know what you don't know because, yeah, it's not there anymore the same way that it was before. A little bit earlier, you mentioned depression. 33% of people who have a stroke roughly will experience depression of some kind. Uh, was your depression kind of based around your the changes that had occurred to you and how you were dealing with them? Was it a mental health type issue that you something that you couldn't grapple with? Do you know what was at the bottom of that?
I think it was just a kind of a temporary, a temporary uh, event that I went through for a few months where little tiny things, like just any little, I would have little sparks or little events that would happen. I mentioned the key that I lost, and there was a couple of other things, and I think I would just get so down on myself for being injured, and that was essentially the source of the depression. And so I was never clinically diagnosed as depressed. I never had to take medication for depression. Um, but it was just something I had to be aware of. And I'm so lucky to have a loving family and a loving wife that was with me every step of the way and really, guiding me and helping me through this and highlighting the things that I could do now that I couldn't do yesterday type of thing. And another thing that was really difficult for me was again, as a scientific person, if you break your arm or you break a bone, then you know that, week one, you're going to do this, and week two, you're going to do this, and week three, by end of week six, maybe week seven, you're going to be all set, right? What I couldn't understand, and I couldn't even fathom was the non-linear recovery of this. You'd have 2 or 3 days in a row where, oh my God, I'm better today than I was yesterday, and I'm better, I'm going to be better tomorrow. And then by next week, I'm going to be really, pretty good. And that linear recovery was completely wrong. My recovery was completely non-linear. It was like looking at a 30-year chart of a stock market. Yeah, eventually, yes, you're going in the right direction, but boy, oh boy, there's some rough days down. That's for sure.
Yeah, that is a great analogy. So those moments of sort of feeling depressed and down, did you ever feel like giving up? Did they get to that? How deep
It
were
never
they?
really got to that level. No, I never really got to that level, but there was a few times where, yeah, it would get close, and then I would just, I don't know, I would just kind of talk myself and just say, okay, just take a deep breath and, one day at a time type of thing, one day at a time. But it was a few dark days. But like
Yeah.
I said, with a good support network around, it was good.
Hmm. Uh, so how have you changed as a person since the stroke?
Well, I guess I'm a lot more appreciative of health. There's always that your focus is on career, your focus is on building wealth and all of this stuff, and it's building, going higher, going faster, doing this. Now I'm not so worried about those things, and I'm very fortunate to work for an awesome company. And so I took, 6 months of short-term disability, and then I did an additional 1 year of long-term disability. And then I went back to work in a part-time basis, and I had a gradual return to work plan. And so started off at like 6 hours a week and worked my way back to full time over the course of I'd say 8 weeks. And when I hit 20 hours per week, I didn't think I was going to make it. I really didn't because I needed morning and afternoon naps at that point, and and uh, and so and anyway, and I eventually pushed through it. And and I use the analogy of a ceiling. And so when I was at that, 20-hour week, I was banging up against the ceiling, and then I was resting, listening to my body and resting. And then I would bang and it would hit the ceiling again and then resting. And then bang, hit the ceiling again and then resting. And then over the course of multiple weeks, my wife and I looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, your ceiling is so much higher now than it used to be." So even though it was painful, even though it was slow, I think for me, and in my case, like I said, every stroke is unique. In my case, going back to work was one of the best things that I could have done. And it really pushed it pushed my recovery from, I would say, 65% all the way up to like 95%. And 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 then I guess this is a long way to answer your question in that, do I aspire to be, the CEO of the company? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, I'm kind of in the last role of my career phase right now, and I have no aspirations for further career growth. My whole point now is knowledge transfer. And how can I take 35 years of industry experience, 35 plus years of working with people, and how can I mentor, younger people and transfer as much knowledge as I can for the relatively short time that I'm going to be still working.
I love it. That is sensational. And then long term, you can write a book.
Perhaps, or maybe start a podcast.
Wow, even better because I am not an engineer and I could come on the engineering podcast and talk about stroke just because I know you. And that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like a great collaboration for sure.
It would be. And that's the beauty about podcasts is actually um, it's a forever, it's evergreen, right? So you record the episode, you put it on YouTube, job done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. And you don't have to worry whether anyone watches it or not. You don't have to worry what people think about it or not. And if you want to, you can interact with people and all that type of stuff. So um, it is one of the best ways to get a deep conversation occurring about a topic that you're interested in and the other person is interested in. And now we have the means. We don't need a studio. You can just do it from your bedroom. This is a little studio. It's in my garden and it's like a garden shed and it's painted black
Yeah.
and it has some sound proofing type of acoustical kind of treatment. And that's about it. And a $400 microphone and a computer and you're done. And now if you edit it, well, then you can learn about editing. Now you're going to have time on your hands and that's going to be perfect. So there's this, and even for me, I was a painting contractor. I still am, still have a painting company. And the boys are working at the moment and things are getting managed and I'm recording an episode. But what this sort of shift in technology has enabled me to do is find new opportunities, new skills, develop new skills, and meet people from all around the world, create a community that was never there before, record 370 episodes. And then, as a result of that, write a book, speak publicly about the topic that I've become interested in. And it's all doable simply because you no longer need to get into the news studio. You no longer need to have a radio contract. You can just be you and you can get it out there. And it's very, very rewarding. It is just amazing how rewarding it can be. So uh, I would encourage you to contemplate all of those opportunities. And now, what's great about uh, this is that if you need help to do it, you can reach out to so many different people to find help as to what you're lacking or what you're missing or what you need to do. And YouTube is just full of helpful videos about lighting, about recording equipment, about sound, about settings, everything you need to know. So there's
YouTube is amazing. I use
yeah,
it so many things. You know, if I have to rip something apart that I haven't done before, first thing I do is watch a couple of YouTube videos,
yeah.
right? And it's amazing.
It was the beginning of my recovery, YouTube, and and it's continuing to be because now if I'm interested in philosophy, if I'm interested in any topic that kind of comes across my desk, then I can just dive deeply into it, and from the comfort of my own home. I don't have to be near somebody to benefit from hearing them speak about a particular topic. It's great. And I don't do well reading, although I like reading. It's a bit of a struggle. Uh, so listening makes it way, way better.
Right. Absolutely. So do you listen to ebooks as opposed to reading them? See, I'm still okay with reading and writing is not an issue. And for me, it's like yesterday I had an incredibly busy day. And I commuted an hour into the largest city and had multiple meetings with multiple different people. There was a evening social hour and all that stuff, and a late night, and then you come home and it's like, okay, I'm feeling it today. So
Yeah,
so it's I pushed it a little bit, but once again, it's relatively speaking, it's very minor, and it's just something to be aware of. It's the new me, right? And then it's again, I'm thankful that that's I'm able to do so much, and I'm just self-aware that when I do push it one day, I make sure that my next day is relatively light.
I love that. Self-aware. I'm the same in that if I have a big Saturday, then Sunday is there's nothing booked. So still, after all the time that
Yes.
I've been going through this, since 2012, I cannot have two big days in a row because then the rest of the week becomes really terrible. Um, and then work piles up, then I can't get stuff done, then I can't catch up, and then it's just a terrible cycle. So it's really important. So if somebody was uh, just coming across this episode, they've just had a stroke, what would you like to say to them?
I would like to say that it's going to be okay. Um, it's you can get better, and will you ever be 100% again? Maybe, maybe not. But don't get discouraged. Um, Work at it every day and keep pushing, and you'll see over time that you get better and better. You have to know when to push, and you have to know when to relax and to allow your body to recover and sleep. And that was the hardest thing for me, and it was like, when do I push and when do I relax? And there's no magic formula. You just you have to to do it the way you feel. And so for me, I like pushing, and then seeing me hit the ceiling, and then recover, and then the next day the ceiling is higher. So for those people that have just had this, there's hope. There's there's a future. And you know what? Sometimes my outlook is better now than it was pre-stroke. You know, I I was focused on climbing higher in that social and in that corporate ladder, and now that's not important to me anymore, and I'm perfectly comfortable. trying to, I guess, just mentor other people to take that knowledge. And so you can pivot and still get fulfillment and very good satisfaction out of life, even though it's slightly different than it used to be. Another thing for me is I use exercise, and I used exercise through my recovery. And it's easy to sit on a chair and just sit there for hour and hour, but if I do that for a couple of days in a row, what ends up happening is I start losing a little bit of mobility in my left side, and so too many days of not walking or being stuck in a chair. And so I would say get up and move, because then I start walking like I'm intoxicated and
Hmm.
staggering a little bit.
Hmm.
And so I try to get out there and I try to walk, at a good portion every day, and get a little exercise. When the weather is not cooperative with that, I have an elliptical in the basement where I could jump on the elliptical for a little while, or a treadmill, and just have a walk indoors. And I think that's really important as well.
Do you ever have the Do you ever walk next to somebody, your wife or somebody you know, and find yourself sort of running into them? I do it all the time with my wife when we're walking,
Yeah.
especially if she's walking on my left.
Yes, I do that, and my wife is very aware of everything, and I also have a voice, and when I first had the stroke, and the best way to describe this is if you had a loose tooth and you're afraid to swallow it, and you start talking like, and as soon as I start talking as if I'm trying not to swallow a loose tooth, my wife 100%, she knows, okay, you've pushed it too far. That's my first sign of being tired, right? And then if I push past that, or if I'm not talking, if I start staggering while I'm walking, she'll know, okay, I know you're pushing it, you're tired. And so see the signs, know your own signs, and just respect those signs. And I guess, going back as well, what really helped me was journaling. And if you've just had a stroke and you think it's so, you're in despair and whatnot, if you journal and keep a really good track of what you're doing, and you will see that over time, you're doing more and more, and you're having less and less issues. And when you're having a bad day and you're feeling, that, it's the despair is just too much, just take a look at your journal, and take a look at how far you've come, and it'll pick you up.
Yeah,
So.
that's great advice. So, what is there? What do you believe about healing or growth that you perhaps didn't believe before?
Um, I think that it's multi-dimensional. And so healing and growth, the definition of it today for me is quite a bit different than the definition it would have been, 3, 4 years ago before stroke. So I'm more appreciative of the little things. And I think I would classify some positive growth, not just in dollars and cents, but positive growth is all about mindset now, and it's less about monetary things. And so I like to say that, if you're thrown a situation and the situation doesn't change, that's the situation. The mindset that you take at that situation could lead you way off there or way off the other direction. And even though the situation is exactly the same, the mindset that you have looking at that situation could make you really angry, really sad, really depressed, or it could make you maybe appreciative. It could make you pivot. It could make you, you know, perhaps happy. But nothing has changed in the situation. It's only your mindset. And I didn't really fully understand that prior to stroke. But I guess I've had time to reflect and I've had time to really do some self-awareness learning. And and now I apply that mindset shift more now than I ever have before.
One of the cool things that I was taught to ask was, is this serving me right now? And if you've got one of those bad mindset moments that you aren't aware of, and you're in the spiral, the negative one, the terrible one, and you have the self awareness just to say, is this serving me right now? That's usually something that can support shifting the mindset in another direction. I've definitely done that and found myself being able to decrease the amount of time that I'm in that loop of negativity, perhaps, and then change it so that that is less impactful. And is it serving me kind of makes me question, like it's a meta position. You have to kind of observe yourself in that situation as you're looping in the negative way. And then from there, you can see that doesn't look good. Like, I've got to stop that.
Right.
I've got to change and shift and get into a mindset that at least is neutral, if not serving me.
Exactly. And it's just making you more injured. Or in my case, when I spiral, it's only harming me,
Mm,
you know. And so I choose to avoid that before it gets too severe, right? And it's not easy. It it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of internal coaching. But once you're able to recognize that first step towards that negative side, and then you take a step back, it's easier than trying to pull yourself back when you've been in it for minutes or hours.
yeah. Um, what's one lesson that stroke has taught you that most people might not understand?
Uh, Patience, perseverance, I think is you know, buzzwords perhaps before, but but nowadays, that perseverance, we can overcome the human brain is so amazing and it's so resilient and 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 just to keep going and to have that perseverance to go and I think that's one thing I did learn from this experience. And so I remember my nurses and the occupational therapists that I had in the hospital, and they said they'd never met a more motivated patient than me. And and it's something about that motivation, that determination, that perseverance that don't accept. And I remember going to my family doctor after this, and the family doctor, she said something that really infuriated me. She goes, just accept the fact that this is the way you are. This is your
Mm,
new reality. And I was nowhere near in my recovery. And and if I had listened to that advice, I would still be stuck at that 65% threshold and nowhere near the 98% threshold that I'm at now. So perseverance is one thing and determination and those are things that I always had, but I learned a lot more about myself and about those things that make it really important.
yeah, that new normal thing is really frustrating. I've heard it a few times as well. And I also heard it during lockdown here in Melbourne, in Australia,
Okay.
during COVID. We had nearly 2 years of lockdown, and saying new normal was such a triggering thing because it came from a, oh no, you shouldn't expect anymore. And that's kind of when somebody said that to me in the past, through stroke recovery, in the future, anytime I've heard that, it's always been, you shouldn't expect any more. And it's like, rest on your laurels, do less, don't make any effort. And it's like, what are you talking about, new normal? As
Yeah.
if we're going to just sit now, this is going to be the peak of our existence. We're just going to accept everything and then not try for better. And that was really frustrating. And I don't do things normally. You know how there's some people who do things to prove other people wrong? I,
Yes.
I'm not that guy. So those types of
Mm.
comments really upset me to hear them from other people, because I'm on the journey to achieving, overcoming, recovering, all those things. And what I don't need is somebody messing with my journey. I don't want you messing with it. If you're enhancing it, you're welcome. You're on board. Let's do this together. If you're not, keep quiet and stay in the corner and don't come near me.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Exactly right. Life's too short, and you can pick and choose who you want to be around. Do you want to be dragged down by people, or do you want to be lifted up? And so we like to socialize with positive people, and we like to avoid those people that are always dragging you down, right? So it's just, you know, again, just I guess it's opened my eyes to we have choices. We have many choices in our life. We have choices about our careers. We have choices about our friends. We have choices about the social things that we can do. And it's okay to say no. It really is. And, I like to push myself a little bit outside my comfort zone. And I think that's okay, as long as it doesn't go too far. But, sometimes if something's not a fit, or if it's not going to end well, then it's okay to say no.
Yeah, I agree. And on that note, David, I really appreciate you reaching out and joining me on the podcast. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Bill. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thanks for tuning into my conversation with David Willick. I hope his honesty about invisible fatigue, sensory overload, and redefining success gives you something to hold onto in your own recovery. Remember to subscribe on YouTube, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, and share this episode with someone who needs it. These simple actions help push this content out to survivors who are feeling lost, confused, or misunderstood. And you never know who might hear exactly what they needed today. If you want to go deeper, remember to check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It's my lived experience guide to post-traumatic growth after stroke. And if you are able to support the show and help me reach 1,000 episodes, visit Patreon at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Remember to take the next step in your recovery, no matter how small it feels today. As always, see you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy quality, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.